Hello, everyone. Welcome to Game Junk Prototype episode 27, recording on Friday, September 4th, 2020. My name is Frank.
My name is Sean.
And my name's Andrew.
And we're going to be talking about a new Nintendo Direct featuring Mario and his 35th anniversary. And we'll probably get into the Nintendo Double Standard. As I was saying, I need a better name for that, but I can't wait to see some of the reactions. I didn't dig deep enough yet, but we'll be getting into it. We'll talk about what we played and dip into a tiny bit of junk mail. We'll see how much we have time for. But thanks for joining us. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good, long weekend here, so that's always good.
Back to work, back to school. Summer is almost done. My days of endless gaming, and this week I've been staying up pretty late playing Spiritfarer. Still going pretty strong on that. But, I'm going to miss playing games all the time, and it sucks. I won't have as much time, but that's why we have trophy guides, so we can get through these things quicker, and just going to have to use more guides. That's my only option. I've got to take advantage of that time. Well, let's not digress anymore. This week, a surprise, I think. Nintendo's Directs seem to always be surprises, except for the big ones.
Well, it was a surprise in terms of it happening, but the news had been rumored for a while.
Sure. And it actually took quite some time for this to happen. I'm assuming the original Mario Brothers came out longer than 35 years ago in Japan. I don't think they launched simultaneously. I could be wrong, but it's interesting that the release of this stuff is shifted for the American calendar, but whatever. Anyway, this was not a surprise. There's been talk about HD remasters for a long time, among other things. So let's get into the announcements from the Super Mario Brothers 35th Anniversary Direct. Let's start with the big one, which also has some controversy attached to it. But Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which has Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy HD remasters coming to Switch September 18th, which is kind of nice, pretty soon. And I got to be honest, I'll buy this 100%. I don't know if I'm that excited for it. Although I will say, especially on Mario Sunshine and Galaxy, Nintendo's art style stands the test of time, no matter what. And the HD itself is a nice upgrade. For Mario 64, I was definitely hoping for, and maybe all of these games, like a reimagining, so to speak, of these games with Mario Odyssey graphics and set up something a little more new age, especially I think when we were talking about Mario Odyssey, I was speculating that Mario 64 would be hidden in that game as an extra world. And I was pretty close. The kingdom the hub area is kind of in there at the end. But I just love how in Odyssey, when you go from moon to moon, it doesn't restart the whole level and all this stuff. And I know the design is dependent on that resetting and progression with some stuff in Mario 64. But I thought it could have been a lot of fun to kind of do everything in that game without waiting for the resets. Anyway, that's a personal thing. How do you guys feel about this? And are you going to get it? Are you excited for it?
Well, I was definitely, when the rumors came out, I was looking forward to it because, well, let me just say, Super Mario Galaxy, I played a little bit of, never got into it enough to really get a feel for it. And that's always been one of those ones that I know reviews are amazing. Frank's always raved about it. And I've always been like, I got to go back to that game. So when I heard this was coming, I was like, oh, perfect. Because, going back to Wii games is always a pain now because the motion controls are just painful. But I was certainly...
John, stop you right there. Whoa. Before you keep going. Motion controls being painful may be true for some games. But for Mario Galaxy, I feel like it was the only game who got motion controls right. I think that's a detriment to this version, although I think with the Joy-Cons, they might still do it. But the actual pointing to pick up the glims or something,
stars or whatever
they're called, that was amazing. And it was like a perfect, unique mechanic that was supplemented by motion controls. That the fact that that's gone, to me, makes the game not as good. Now, it might be there in some capacity, but I likely wouldn't use it. I would use Pro controllers for everything. I'm not a fan of the Joy-Cons, but that actually hurts the replayability of this for me. Sorry, Sean, continue.
Okay, well, yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, the big thing for me is that I was expecting and hoping both Mario Galaxy games would be in this collection, and for some reason, Part 2 is left out. So that's definitely a big disappointment for me. I'm also kind of ticked off because I actually bought the GameCube version of Mario Sunshine not that long ago. That, for some reason, it was just one game that I never had in my collection, and I saw it somewhere, and it certainly wasn't cheap. Like, I don't think I paid like a crazy amount for it, but certainly more than I would normally pay for a GameCube game. And just because I wanted to have it and wanted to go back to it, but then with this coming out, I'm kind of annoyed that I paid whatever I paid for that.
I recently have been playing the Super Mario 64 with my kids, like on Nintendo 64, and I'm finding it pretty fun still, even though it is the oldest of all these and it doesn't have the HD treatment to it. I still think the gameplay is pretty tight, with all Mario games. They're pretty solid. And actually, the only game I haven't played really, which is I think the controversy you were alluding to, is that Super Mario Galaxy 2 is not in the package, and that's the only one I haven't played. So for me, I've played and beaten all of these games already. I enjoyed them all. Like, I think Mario games are pretty replayable, and it is a shame that Mario Galaxy 2 is not in this collection. I'm sure, knowing Nintendo, they have some sort of re-release up their sleeve for just that one for another $80 or whatever they're going to charge for it. But I don't know if I'll buy this, but I'm definitely interested in playing the games, and I'm sure that they'll try to keep the motion controls in it with the Switch Joy-Cons, and I'm sure it won't be changed that much.
The aiming is the thing that makes that unique, and I don't know how they do that with, I'm assuming, the right stick or something like that. It just seems way less fun to me. Not a huge deal, but
well, I think you could do it with the IR sensor thing, probably, if you're playing on a TV. It might almost look like the Duck Hunt light gun, where you're kind of like taking a picture of it and maybe trying to get the proper location.
Yeah, but you still need a pointing device. So if you're playing with a Pro controller, are you tilting the whole controller? Like, what are you doing to collect that stuff? Like, it isn't as natural as the articulation with one hand with the Wiimote was actually perfect. I loved it. The things were called star bits. I was way off, which is interesting. Score bits, star bits. Was there inspiration? I don't know. There wasn't. I know where the name came from, and that wasn't it. Anyway, while we're talking about, I think it is weird that Mario Galaxy 2 doesn't come with it, because I think if out of all the games, that's the one people played the least, as it was at the end of or I think towards the end of the Wii life cycle. But I'm kind of excited now. Huck, you said this is the other point of controversy. You don't think you'll pick it up. Well, Nintendo has definitely put some impetus on needing to pick this up, because apparently it will only be available for purchase. There's some misleading stuff as to whether or not it's even available to play after March 2021. So after that point, both physical and digital of the versions of this game will cease to be sold, which to me is ridiculous. I know you might think I love exclusivity, the idea of a vault and stuff like that, but this just seems really weird, especially like games that are beloved. And it's not like it's just so weird that out of all the games, now they're deciding to put a window on this.
Can I throw out an idea on
sure,
this?
Absolutely.
They couldn't get Super Mario Galaxy 2 to fit or to run well enough. So they decided that instead of missing the launch window for the 35th anniversary, they're just shipping the 3. and then next year, when next year rolls around, they'll release a upgraded version with all 4.
I don't know. I don't think
Sounds
they'll
like a
do
very
that.
Nintendo thing to do.
I think if anything, and what people are speculating, I think your idea about maybe it wouldn't fit or something like that could be right, and they needed more time for Galaxy 2. But I think they, and this has been speculated, after that time they'll release each one individually, and perhaps an individual version of Galaxy 2, which is probably more expensive. And
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, if you have to rebuy those individually rather than in the collection, I mean, I'm going to snap. And let's get into it right now. I haven't read any comments. I should, but in my head, I can just picture Nintendo fans just justifying everything Nintendo does. And it makes me sick to my stomach because I hear everyone complaining about backwards compatibility for everything. The fact that they don't offer backwards compatibility is an injustice to gamers, and it's greed and everything. EA, everything is attacking every console maker, but whatever Nintendo does, I'm personally am glad they delayed it. I think it's going to be for the best. And as Nintendo always says, I'd rather release or a delayed game that something is good, but a bad game is forgotten immediately or some bullshit. I don't know. But it's so weird how people rationalize everything Nintendo does. And it just boggles my mind. They are the greediest company I've ever seen. And I get it. They make the best games. A lot of the best games of all time are made by Nintendo. But their recent track record is not that good. I'm sorry. Like, aside from re-releases, Mario Odyssey is a masterpiece in my opinion. Breath of the Wild is an amazing game. I prefer Horizon, but I understand people who prefer Breath of the Wild more. Those are 2 all-time amazing games, and they came out the same year. Recently, it's been a lot of re-releases of stuff. Like, what have they done? I guess Animal Crossing, but I don't know. I don't even count that. It's like a
I
kind
think
of
that game's pretty huge, though.
It is, but it's kind of a niche thing. I don't
count. Would you count the new Pokemon game, or is that kind of like not the Nintendo first party? Would you consider that second party?
I would count it, but again, I know this is biased because I don't like Pokemon, but it does feel like iterations of the exact same game in some ways. That's been going for a long time, which I get that people love. Doesn't bother me. Even the fact that they double dip on those for $80 and no one seems to care. If any other company did this or EA, you'd never hear the end of it. It's ridiculous.
That's for sure.
What was the last kind of big original Nintendo IP? I want to say like Splatoon, maybe.
I think so. ARMS to some degree.
Yeah.
I think ARMS was after Splatoon because Splatoon was on the Wii U. But also the fact that so many of these games, and let's get into the next announcement while we're tying this all together. The Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Brawl or something like that. Bowser's Fury, which didn't really say what that is another Wii U game. So many of these Switch games are Wii U games. And the fact that it's weird to me that everyone defends Nintendo, but there clearly must not have been that many people buying the Wii U in these games for them to have such a big market and be able to charge so much money for these. Like, where were those fans when the Wii U came out and bought all these games, and why aren't they complaining now? I don't know. I'm really starting to get turned off by Nintendo. I used to think they were the greatest company when I was younger, and everything they're doing lately, I just don't understand how they don't get criticized more. And it's always written off with this, well, Nintendo's being so Nintendo right now or something. And it's like, why is that okay for Nintendo to do? First of all, let me say, I don't care what any company does. I'll just choose whether to use my wallet to support them. But other people certainly don't feel that way. They feel like there's a need to complain about everything every company does. And Nintendo just seems to always escape unscathed. And it's starting to drive me crazy.
Well, I've heard a lot of negative comments about it. I haven't heard too many people defending some of the stuff from this particular Nintendo Direct. I think you're right. In general, there are people who defend Nintendo, there's a very loyal fan base there. The Wii U thing is weird though, because I mean, yeah, the sales numbers were low. We've heard that for a long time. But I think with this game now, the Mario 3D World, there is no major Nintendo game that is exclusive to the Wii U anymore. They have all been brought to the Switch as far as I can think of. I guess maybe Splatoon 1 hasn't, but I mean, I don't know if that would really count. Like
he's coming, right? I
Yep.
think.
Yep.
I feel like there's one more or two more we're forgetting, but whatever. Yeah, like Twilight Princess, I guess, but that was on the Wii as well.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be coming though. Guaranteed that's coming.
Probably. But I mean, you could also say like, yeah, there's a lot of re-releases and things, but in some ways that's a testament to Nintendo's timeless design of their games, that they can release these games and they're still playable and they're still exciting and people want to play them still. So I don't know that you could say that for every single developer out there.
Kind of like what you were saying last week, Frank, with Ratchet and Clank, how it's borderline unplayable now. You can't really say that about Mario 64.
You can kind of say it. I'm not going to say unplayable, but the camera, while it was innovative at the time, is a little clunky. And I love Mario 3D World, and I think the design is amazing in that game. But I hate when they switch to an accelerated run rather than holding a button for sprint. You have to like build up your speed in a run. I don't think that's an improvement over previous Mario games. And Mario Sunshine was very good, but we'll see what people say about it when they're playing it again. In particular, spraying everything in the goddamn world for blue coins, which is the worst ever. Fuck you. It's almost as bad as blowing on stuff in Donkey Kong Country. Gee, like it drives me crazy. But everyone, that's the hot take. Mario Sunshine's actually my favorite Nintendo game. Mario.
I'll defend Mario Sunshine.
Well,
I like that game a lot.
No one, if you say it's your favorite, you're trying way too hard.
I remember it getting some pretty bad reviews when it first came out.
Yeah.
Or maybe not bad, but it was like lower than usual for Mario.
It was definitely a unrecognizable, like the Nintendo bump didn't seem to happen for that game for whatever reason.
Yeah, it just happened 6 years later.
A delayed bump.
All right, let's get into some of the other stuff. Game & Watch, Super Mario Brothers. I mean, this is more Nintendo getting into toy stuff. The next couple things I'm going to talk about. I mean, that's okay. I don't think I'll be buying this. I have no desire for this whatsoever. Seems pretty niche. It's probably sold out already. Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. Now, I don't have any need for this. I don't think I have the room for it with like a hardwood floor that it would require, but this looked pretty cool. I have to say, if I was a kid, this looks pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think more so than the Lego stuff that they're putting out this year, this is kind of like I'm curious to understand exactly how it works. Like it seems like so you've got an actual RC car that's being controlled by the game as you're driving in the game, and there's a camera on it, so stuff around your room is being shown on the screen. And then I guess items and power-ups and stuff are in the game only, so those are sort of like an AR overlay on what's going on in the room. I'm just trying to understand what else. And I guess if you get hit by an item, it looked like the car actually stops for a minute and won't drive. So it's kind of an interesting integration of stuff. I mean, yeah, definitely for kids, and it could be something for Christmas for my kids. I'm already thinking, but the one thing I'm not sure about.
You touched on it there, but the failure states are going to be. Like, I don't know how those are going to get handled. It looks great in this video.
Mm-hmm.
It could. First of all, you need those controls to be so tight. Like when you turn, it has to be perfect. So if they've nailed that, that's cool. But you hit something in the room, someone knocks the car off the track. You do a bad job driving. I mean, I sucked with remote control cars when I was a kid. So if every car controlled like a Mario Kart game, I definitely would have been better at it. But a lot of question marks. If it all works, definitely cool.
Well, the other thing though too is like I'm already thinking. So like most people, you'd probably want to buy a set that has 2 cars, right? But I think you need to have 2 switches as well, right? Like there's no way to do like a split screen version of a race. So that's already going to start getting pretty expensive.
That was the other thing. Like from a high level, like commercial, it looks really cool. But then as you're thinking about it, like you have your kid who has this like in-world car racing around your feet, and they're literally sitting on a couch staring at a screen. Like, why even have the car there? They're not even paying attention to the car other than they can go maybe like have their friends get in the way or something. I don't know why. I don't really understand functionally after thinking about it for a while why this is interesting. Obviously a kid is going to be like, oh, that's so cool, I want it, or a Dwyer, right? But like
the one thing I'll say is it seemed like you can build your own track in your room, which is kind of a cool idea, right?
I don't know about build your own. I guarantee they have preset tracks, and then you choose which one. Yeah, I bet you choose which one, and then
there's pick. 4 gates, right? Like you have to physically set gates 1 through 4, which does determine the track, but there's obviously curves within that track. In the example they showed that you're still picking some probably between those 2 gates, what happens between there. So I think you set the gates up any way you want, and then within the game, you pick what type of section of track you want between the 2 and maybe manipulate it a bit. But I think Huck brought up a great point that I hadn't thought of. What is the motivation for this? Like you'd think there's some reason that makes this better than normal Mario Kart, or at least a different enhanced version of it that offers some new unique gameplay opportunity. And you would think it would be dependent on some type of physical interaction, whether it's, someone who's not driving can affect the course or do something, maybe put obstacles. I don't know. I'm starting to think of like Zombie U and the one Nintendo Land game with Mario, like weird gameplay opportunities that this would afford. And maybe there are some that I can't think of off the top of my head, but if there were, I would think the video would have showcased that stuff as being really cool, and that's not there. So I definitely understand Huck's point when it comes to this. Like, what is the gameplay opportunity here?
Yeah, like with the car stopping when you hit them, like that's cool from a high level. But if you are the player, you're almost not even going to notice that because your nose is stuck on the screen. So you're not even experiencing the 3D world aspect of it. Whatever, breaking the fourth wall aspect of it, right? Like it just seems weird as a player of the game. It might be cool for people watching, but probably not even, like, unless, I don't know. I'm a little confused.
The only cool thing is like just driving it through your own house, right? It's like seeing that perspective. Sure. I obviously thought of The Shining when I saw this stuff and would be curious.
Yeah, sure.
But that's the only neat thing about it. If you could like set up a cool world, and maybe they're thinking sharing tracks or stuff you build in your own house on YouTube or social media, maybe would be neat, and seems like something kids on YouTube would watch videos for.
It reminded me of like the
specific surface. Like how many floors in your house are big enough and are completely flat?
Definitely could be an issue. But it reminded me of like the Micro Machines games too. I always really liked those. The idea of, having races on like sort of miniature household environments and stuff. So, I don't know. I took it as you can kind of create your own custom course within your house. If it's just a bunch of templates you're choosing from and stuff, which is definitely possible, maybe it's not as cool.
Okay, moving on. The last thing, I guess, while we're talking merchandise, there was some toys showcased and some Puma shoes, Mario-inspired shoes, and clothing and stuff like that. As far as I can tell, the Puma shoes are already sold out. Pre-orders are done. Like you can't get it unless you pre-ordered already. So they'll be going for probably $600 on eBay. And I don't mind the exclusivity of things to some degree. And this happened with like there's Nike PlayStation shoes, the Paul George shoes, and other stuff. And I think that stuff's kind of neat, but it sucks that they're exclusive because people just buy them up and it's all secondary market stuff. It's not like if they could actually find a way to make it exclusive to people who want them and are passionate about it and, you know, get in line or do something because they want it, not to sell it, I'd be way more down for it. But today, that's all that happens. It's just people buy them all up and sell them online. Anything exclusive just becomes like ridiculous price markups for people who actually want it. And I don't know, it's getting a little annoying when every time I see something cool or fun, it's like, nope, that's gone. They sold out in 10 seconds. I know I'm kind of going against what I've said in the past, but it's more so that it's just people making money off of it that bothers me than it is that it's exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like I would never think of trying to get any of these things because I know you're going to be paying through the nose for it. So forget it.
Okay,
this must be part of like Nintendo's way to try to keep, you know, their stuff relevant and to keep people interested in it. And I mean, they kind of do the same. I mean, it's not really the same thing, but how they keep their prices high all the time. They never have any sales, which I think is smart because then you know I might as well buy it now. It's not going to go on sale. I imagine it's the same with all this stuff by keeping it kind of limited, like the physical things. It almost like creates this demand for people to want to go out and get it right away. Kind of like, you know, with the Wii shortages, though I don't think that was totally them on purpose doing that. I think the demand was so high. But then I believe there was Switch shortages at the beginning of the Switch life cycle. And I think the Wii was the opposite, but only because it was such a confusing name and not really a very attractive design. But I think to some extent they do this on purpose, is to try to make it basically rare or you know, low in stock, just to drive that demand and keep the word of mouth kind of going.
Yeah, it definitely builds hype. So,
but what is the Mario shoe only having 300 copies or like who knows? What is that driving up demand for? I understand in the case of a console or stuff that will eventually be available. This is just like, it's just marketing stuff that
well, it could be people it could be them trying to drive people to their Nintendo store daily to try to see all the new stuff that is on pre-orders, or for the chance to pre-order the new thing. If they really wanted those shoes, maybe more shoes will come out next week. And unless they're constantly checking, they won't have a chance. So it could be something like that, though that's pure speculation.
Yeah, I mean, this was all through Puma. You had to buy it through Puma, so.
Oh, okay.
I mean, whatever. Who cares? I'm done talking about this bullshit. I don't care. I don't want the fucking shoes. Anyway, that's all. Oh, the last thing, which is actually the thing I was probably most intrigued by, Super Mario Brothers 35, which is a version of the original game on Switch Online, similar to Tetris 99, very similar. I'm assuming built on the same framework. Where you play against other Mario players and attack them based on your progress. And it's a battle royale or battle mode game where you try to be the last person surviving a playthrough of the original Mario Brothers, which this sounds pretty cool to me. I really like Tetris 99. I thought it was a cool take on battle royale. And I do like that Nintendo is using different genres and classic games to experiment with that format.
It's also kind of like the NES remix games that they had on the Wii U. I don't know if you guys tried either of those, but they were kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested. I haven't tried Tetris 99 yet myself. But the one thing with this, so with the 3D All-Stars thing, they're saying there's a limited window within which they're going to be selling it. For this game, I think they said there's a limited window within which you can play it. Like, it won't even be available on the service after a certain date.
I didn't notice that. Which is
Pretty sure. Let me double check right now.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but by any means. But that is a weird thing, especially because Tetris 99 is so popular, and it was free to play. I think in the spirit of building a microtransaction community with skins and stuff like that. So I'm surprised they're not going that direction with this. Although it could just be if people have a free version of Mario to play forever, will they buy these other things, and will they buy virtual console versions and stuff like that? I think they would, because you'd still play the original Mario Brothers in Switch Online. Even though they changed the library or rotate games, I don't think that's ever left. So it does seem like a pretty weird choice.
Yeah, it says Super Mario 35 is available to play from October 1st to the end of March.
So that's the same as 3D All-Stars, which I think is all part of the 35th anniversary window. Whatever. I don't really care. It's just weird. I don't care. I know people say, well, it sure sounds like you care. I don't care about this exclusivity. I just care that people defend Nintendo and just rip every other company when they do stuff that isn't consumer friendly. It's so weird. All right, that's all I have to say for this stuff. Do you guys have any other additional thoughts on the Mario Direct?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about what we played. Huck, do you want to go first?
Sure. I could just say that I started Ghost of Tsushima, and I am loving it. I'm not very far. I'm maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours in, and I'm really enjoying it. I was really impressed with the intro. I thought the tutorializing they did was perfectly paced, just like slowly introducing you to all the mechanics. I didn't expect the quality or production values of this game to be quite as high as it is. And I'm only running it on a base PS4, so I'm probably not even seeing as much as Frank would be seeing. But I really am enjoying this game a lot more than I thought I was going to. And I've got 6 more days before the library has to take it back, so I'm going to be hopefully powering through, and then maybe we could do a bigger review for the show, because Frank, you're done, right? And has Dax finished, you said?
Yep.
So maybe we'll try to get our next Game Junk review on that, because I'm really impressed so far, and I will not be pulling the platinum like you. I'll be just going straight story pretty much, maybe a few side quests here and there, but yeah, so far really enjoying it, really impressed.
Unfortunately, I think that is the optimal way to experience the game. So I think you will enjoy the game as a result of not playing it too much. Although I'm curious to see if it still gets repetitive within the just base story mode.
Which the main line, yeah.
The mission design is so repetitive. It's crazy. Sean, you got anything?
Yeah, so I checked out Vader Immortal.
I bought it.
We were talking about. I played the first 2 chapters. I haven't played the third one yet. It's kind of weird. It comes as each chapter is like its own app or game. But I tried the first 2, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it is a little pricey maybe for what it is, because it really feels like you're playing an interactive movie to a certain degree. There's some lightsaber fighting and some force skill stuff, but it kind of feels like a game where it's like, no matter what you do, even if you're failing at things, you can't die. And if you're kind of slow at things, they'll help you along. So I think it is good as a game to introduce people to VR, which I think kind of is what it originally was, right? Because it was free on Oculus originally. And it kind of, I would say now, has become my, if I had to choose something to throw on for somebody to introduce them to VR, it'd probably be that. But I still did enjoy it. I mean, I think it's the production quality of it was actually pretty good. Like I for whatever reason, because I know this came out on Oculus originally, and this is a port, I was expecting it to not look good. And I mean, yeah, PSVR stuff always looks kind of low res and not amazing, but I think they did pretty well within the confines of that. Like just there's a mood and an atmosphere, and I think the music and the sound and the voice acting and all that stuff really helps too. But I thought some of the visuals are actually really cool, and I mean it's you kind of become an apprentice to Vader, I guess, as part of it. Not sure what happens in Chapter 3, but so you're kind of interacting with him and just kind of having him come up and kind of be in your face is kind of an interesting experience. But I liked it. I guess maybe wait for it to go on sale on PSVR if you can. It's $40 Canadian, which seems a bit steep. I mean, each chapter is like half an hour to 40 minutes tops. But, if you think of it as a movie, like I said, and you're just going to sit down and play through a 90-minute movie one night, that's kind of what it is. So it's not all bad.
Nice. I've continued to play Spiritfarer. I actually put a lot of time into it this week. Still not done it. It's a pretty long game to do everything. I am feeling some of the issues that Huck was feeling, where the stuff that I thought was going to be automated at some point really isn't. I find I'm doing the same stuff over and over again, and it's not as much fun in that sense. Still love the visuals. I think visually it's one of my favorite games ever. I don't think I touched on this either, but clearly influenced by, to me, Wes Anderson movies and stuff like that. The look of the boat and just probably all of his movies have some 2D elements. And I feel Wes Anderson all over this game, combined with animation and Bashi, maybe Miyazaki stuff as well. Love the game. I didn't mention, I know I said it was scratching my Viva Pinata itch, but I think the great thing it's done is include story elements on top of that. So each character has their own story that really helps drive progression throughout the game, rather than just being motivated by getting more stuff or experimenting, which I prefer that in these types of games rather than being left to your own devices. I like having goals and things that are driving me to progress through the game. I know it's been commented on as a commentary on death in a lot of the reviews, or the game is about death and dealing with death. I don't think I've played enough of the game. I think I need to beat it to say whether or not I feel that way definitively about the game. So we'll see when I finish it. And I'll mention, you guys talked about it last week. I played Carrion on Xbox Game Pass, and I was loving this game. I say was just because I played it, I think 3 hours straight, and haven't returned to it since. But I was blown away. The locomotion is one of the coolest things I've played in a game in a long time. I've never played anything like it. It feels so polished and intuitive. Moving this creature with its tentacles through the world, and basically you're just floating. Although you do need a wall to grab onto, even though almost every place has walls, so it doesn't really matter, except for a place early in the game, which I read an interview with the developers or a story, and it said they had that room because people thought you were floating rather than grabbing onto stuff. And I'm loving it. I will say the lack of map, it's certainly related to the areas are pretty small and kind of designed as puzzle boxes, I would say. So I get why there's not a map, but I do find myself confused by how it all interlocks. And if I wanted to go back and explore a previous area, I wouldn't even know how to go about it. I'd just be kind of trial and error, I think.
Yeah, I played a little bit more as well, and I was thinking about that. Like, I don't think I've come across any places where I've actually had to backtrack. Like, you can, I just don't know why. Like, I don't know. Maybe if you miss something important, but yeah, I guess the other thing, some of the corridors and stuff, they kind of look the same after a while, so you could get lost if that was an issue. But like you said, you kind of move on from place to place and don't have to go back too much. So it hasn't been too much of an issue. There's a few of these flashback sequences where you control a different character, and I hit a few of those, and the controls for that felt a little clunky to me. I was like, what's up with this? But whatever, it was fine.
Yeah, I like it as a change up. I'm curious to see where it goes from a story perspective with that. But I talked about this on Film Junk, and I'll mention it again here. Jurassic Park for Sega Genesis, a game that's never really talked about, was not amazing, but had some cool ideas. I think this game is certainly using that as an influence. Excuse me.
So did you actually control the dinosaurs in that game then?
You played as the raptor or as Alan Grant, I think it was Alan Grant. And yeah, first of all, the graphical style is very similar. If you look at like screenshots and maybe blur your eyes, they'd be pretty close. And playing from two perspectives, human and a creature, seems like it's part of it as well, which each had unique control schemes that were similar. I don't know. I thought I expected to see some piece on this somewhere as like a title, because Jurassic Park's huge. I thought they'd be trying to tie it into that, or this game was inspired by Jurassic Park and just to get exposure. But if I'm just imagining it and that wasn't an actual thing, it's crazy how similar they are. But I feel like there is a connection. So if anyone's seen anything with that, or I'm onto something, let me know. But I'm loving Carrion. I do need to finish it, hopefully this weekend.
I'll have to go back to it. I just looked it up. It's only 4 or 5 hours, so it's
a
pretty short game. So I'll have to take a look again.
And that's all I've got. Anyone else have anything for what we played?
No.
Okay. So let's get into some junk mail. Probably just one, but we'll see how it goes. Let me see here. Okay. This is from Colin. I'm not sure which Colin, just says Colin.
And also, just a quick mention, some of these are a little older too. I don't remember how far back these go, but we just kind of decided to pull back, some junk mail that had been sent in that we hadn't actually gotten to. So gamejunkpodcast@gmail.com.
All right. Hey, game friends. Sorry, I said all right. That's not an email. Hey, game. Question this week for Huck, since he's the port master of the crew. Digital Foundry recently did a video on the terribly optimized release of Deadly Premonition 2 for the Nintendo Switch. Link included. Despite the fact that the title is a Switch exclusive, the game is very poorly optimized with frozen screens, extremely low frame rates, screen judder, and other technical issues. One of the Digital Foundry writers hypothesized that the reason for the performance issues is a result of the developer creating the game on Unity for PC and then being forced to convert it to Switch without sufficiently accounting for the difference in CPU performance. What do you think of this hypothesis? What has your experience been with converting games to Switch? What do you find are the smartest ways to make compromises during the porting process while maintaining the playability and integrity of the game? Enjoying the weekly discussions, Colin.
Yeah, so I watched this video. It was from July, so I'm not sure when this video came in, but I think Deadly Premonition came in around that time, so probably at least a couple months old. But yeah, when you're doing a port, there are definitely a lot of things to take into account, and the CPU performance, I think he was probably right on, and it's hard to tell. They did a example in the video where it was running in the open world, and the guy is running along the street and it was running at like 15 frames a second, and they then looked at the ground and it still stayed at a solid 15 frames per second, which usually means it's not because of what you're drawing on the screen. So it's not using the GPU, it's something in the CPU. So either it's so what I think from just looking at it, it's probably has to do with loading, or maybe loading either different textures and stuff, or just trying to switch assets, their LODs. There was a lot of LOD pop in, especially on the trees. And when you go to try to fix something like this, or you go to a port, the first thing you have to use is a tool called a profiler, which basically you hook up to the game that's running. You usually do it on PC first, but you can also do it on the Switch, and you basically use this tool called the profiler to tell you exactly what's taking so long. And I bet if they ran the profiler on this, it would probably point right at the trees, because that was the first thing that stood out. There was a lot of trees. They looked really dense, like they had a lot of polys on them, a lot of poly count. And a lot of the other stuff, at first, I thought the game was going to run fine outside, because when they first show you it, a lot of the buildings are really flat. It looks basically like the world looks very similar to like what it did in the 360 era when the original Deadly Premonition came out. A lot of flat buildings, not much shading. They did show a little bit of interiors where it was quite higher resolution, but those also ran really low, which was kind of surprising because it's such a small area. But maybe in those cases they had really high poly counts in all those. So you can use this profiler to basically see what's taking so long, where it's taking so long, and you could just basically reduce the size of trees, of buildings, and by reduce I mean make them more like square boxes rather than really complicated shapes. It could also be effects, though it didn't look like there's too many effects going on here. Maybe they had, like, it looks like they had some bloom on there, maybe some color grading or something. So there is some, they call it post-processing. It's kind of done after. But again, by looking at the ground, that didn't seem to affect anything. So probably not. And it also didn't look like it had too much physics, which is also another cause of concern. Usually though, in my experience on the Switch, it's all about the loading. And there was one where, and just creating new assets on the fly. So Frank knows about this. It's called an object pool. Basically, you have to create all your objects ahead of time, or as your. So they showed the example in the video of when he shoots the gun, there was like a big hitch, and the game basically stopped. And that's because it's probably trying to create a bullet for the first time, or maybe creating a bullet every time, though it seemed like after he shot more, it didn't happen. But basically, you create that asset, and every time it actually sucks up a lot of the CPU to create that thing and allocate the memory and do all that fun stuff that I'm probably putting everyone to sleep with right now.
Well, with Unity specifically, like,
yes,
instantiations are a huge deal. And anything at runtime that you're instantiating, loads are also a big deal. And I would say for Embers of Miram, Paul did like a ton of work reducing hitches for loading and stuff like that, and came up with some amazing solutions for like streaming in loading. And
yep.
Like that's a huge part of optimization. And also with the instantiations, like we basically removed any instantiation possible at runtime.
Yeah,
so
huge.
That's definitely something to factor in with Unity. I would say in general, my thought was, when we on old consoles, they would be like catering games to hardware almost, right? Where like we used to talk with stuff on Super Nintendo or even PlayStation, like, and there's stories about developers getting every last, bit or byte of RAM to use and take advantage of. And, over this still happens, but over a console life cycle, fully taking advantage of hardware. And now that hardware has scaled so quickly and memory costs and, it's not as big of a factor. Like you can make a game that is reasonably good looking and not perfectly optimized that'll run because hardware is just so good, and it's growing faster than probably your ability to maximize it, unless you've got a team of 50 to or over 100 people, right? That can make high quality assets. Like that's why Unity is so popular for indie. But then when you start to scale something back, it starts to reveal all these performance issues where you might not even have to address a performance issue with, the top of the line consoles. And now you go back to the Switch, which is, if I remember correctly, kind of like two Wii's sandwiched or something like that, or Wii U's. And now it's like, okay, we got to rethink things on this. And Nintendo has the advantage, well, not advantage, but they know they're only releasing on that console. So they have to have their memory footprints and know exactly what they're doing from the beginning, where scaling backwards is always going to be an issue. And that's, to me, puts Nintendo in a bad position with some stuff as well, where they're always behind on the technology. And it's like third party performance always suffers and will always suffer. And I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but Unity is great for prototyping, getting small games going, but there's a whole nother level of shipping a game that takes a lot of extra loving care, and in particular doing it on the Switch. I don't have that much experience with it at all, but I've heard Huck talk about stuff and heard things, and it's definitely an issue. And I think that's another reason why probably a lot of games you're seeing launch on Switch and PC, maybe they're finding it's better to make sure it runs on Switch and then port it to other stuff, because they want to hit that market for sure. Because people are buying a lot of stuff on Switch. So if they go the other way and then it barely plays on Switch, that would like really affect sales. So everything's Switch first now, which kind of makes sense. It's probably easier to scale up than it is to scale back.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, just so I can nerd out on this a little bit more, I would say that though the biggest thing is that they probably just ran out of time, and they probably just had a hard ship date, and they ran out of money, and they basically had to ship it in whatever shape it was, because this stuff is solvable. And obviously, though, if you don't plan for it at the beginning, it's just going to take longer to fix. So if you don't have that time, fixing gigantic memory issues is going to be a lot of work. And so they also mentioned the loading screens taking a long time. Now, the Switch does load slower than the other two consoles, but it was quite substantial. Like they were saying, like a minute and a half to load the open world, and the open worlds were pretty sparse. And this sort of points to me, from not looking at anything, obviously, that they just don't have their assets organized properly. And I've done Switch ports where if you don't organize your assets as efficiently as possible, it's going to take a lot longer. Maybe if your assets, like if your texture sizes and your music files are really large, that's going to hit you really hard on the loading, because you got to load in all that stuff first. If you're not streaming audio, but then you have just all this stuff to load in, especially in open world. You've got all these buildings, all these textures to load in. It's going to take a long time if you don't properly group them together. If there's duplicates of stuff, that's going to add time, because now you're loading basically multiple copies of the same texture and things. So you really got to be careful what you're doing there. And that organization takes time, and it is a giant pain in the ass, especially if you're coming down to the end of a project and things keep changing, because then you got to keep. Unity's tried to address this. They've been upgrading this kind of system for organizing. It was called asset bundles. Now it's called addressables, but it's kind of their way to keep track of all these assets. And it has been improving, but it is still a pain. And I think that's probably where they ran it out of time, because if you don't plan for it ahead of time, it's a huge effort to take your game and convert it into using these asset bundles. And it does take a ton of time and a ton of organization. You have to know where everything is being used and track it and make sure that everything is in the proper location. And in addition, that if you don't organize it properly before you ship, patching a game on Switch is probably close to impossible, because Nintendo has very strict guidelines on how big your patch can be. So if they did not organize this ahead of time, now going back and patching the game will be almost impossible for them to do. So I would not hold out any hope of a patch for this game. I would probably hope that it just comes out on PS5 or Xbox Series X or whatever, because if it is this packaging thing, it'll be really hard for them to get a proper fix.
I don't have anything really to add, but just popped in my head that Bloodstained had a big issue with this. They launched I think PC, Xbox, PS4, and Switch all at the same time. And the Switch version, just the performance was terrible from what I understand. And I don't know if it's been fixed properly.
But the patch stuff too, like I know Unity's fixed some of this stuff with their asset bundling, but you know, to patch a Unity game used to basically be a new executable every time. Like like to update it, it's usually a huge, almost the exact size of the game previously if you didn't organize it right, which is a pain in the ass as well. And I will say, I don't know how much you, or probably more so Huck, have looked into the data-oriented tech stack and entity component system on Unity, which are some new features of them, presumably, in my opinion, trying to scale up to higher performing engines in terms of graphic fidelity. That is making huge differences with instantiation problems that you talked about, and having just, how should I phrase this? Lots of things on the screen at once. I don't want to use Unity terminology, but like having lots, like a bullet hell game or stuff with lots of stuff on screen has become much, like there's some tech demos of that stuff that are really impressive without having hitches. And so I think it's just going to get better, but Unity games definitely have issues like that.
Yeah, so if there's any Unity companies out there listening that want some expert advice, I'm open to hearing it and providing that advice.
Equilibrium sys.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Was there one other thing I wanted to add about Unity? I forgot it if I did.
It is a good engine though. Like this, like they were talking in the video also about, oh, maybe they didn't have access to the source code and stuff like that. You don't need access to the source code. I've never had access to the source code. I think they're referring to like the port of Inside, because Inside ran on Unity and that game was doing crazy lighting shit that no one does. So they got access to the source code because they had really early version of Unity that they were running on, and they needed to change it to fix what they were trying to do. And that's like Deadly Premonition wouldn't have needed any of that stuff.
So Inside got access to the source code without paying for it? Is that?
I don't know the details.
Oh, okay.
I've watched a talk with one of the guys who did the lighting solution, and he was saying they got access to the engine to make some optimizations.
Because you can pay for it, but it's very expensive.
Yeah. I don't know. I think he said they worked out a deal, whatever that means.
Okay. I would also say, if anyone's listening to this and is curious about game development or want to see what the stuff we're talking about, kind of get an introduction to it, or what Unity or an engine is, like Unity is, you can download it for free. There's so many tutorials on stuff. Like if you have an interest, Unity is the way to get into it, I would say. Definitively.
Yeah, everything's so easy to find online now. The problem is really knowing the terminology to use. So I would say start by watching some like videos of tutorials for full games and just trying to listen closely and hear the terminology they use so that you can then, look into things in further detail when you want to.
Absolutely. And also just be careful when you're searching stuff online. Try to find videos or forum posts that are like dated 2020, 2019, because, there's the standard Unity post, collision not triggering, something like, and, that system is changed over time. And there's probably 500,000 posts, I would guess, for collision not triggering in Unity. You could definitely find old stuff that is irrelevant, and just that's the only thing, because it's so popular. You kind of have to filter information, and when possible, refer to current like standard Unity documentation on their website rather than forum stuff. Or
and I would also say, if you're watching YouTube videos, try to take them from either like official Unity channel or channels that are sponsored by Unity, or just from game developers that because there are some guys out there that make Unity tutorial videos that don't exactly know what they're doing, and they will show you ways that quote unquote work, but aren't necessarily a good way to do something. Not that you necessarily really need to worry about that if you're just playing around, but just beware.
Yep. Agreed. And terminology, I agree, is a big thing. Like when I was learning it, like we were using an early version of Unity when I first started working on it. And the stuff I did was so stupid. And I wish I had what there is now, like examples of everything. And, me switching my mindset from other engines to this, definitely now it seems ridiculous that I had those issues, but you still have to learn it and learn their version of stuff. So having videos is a huge help. All right. That's going to wrap it up. We will not be doing any more junk mail. We've exceeded our time allowance.
There's your techgasm for the week.
I don't know if there's anything major announced for next week. I don't think I'll be picking up Avengers anytime soon based on some review stuff I saw.
I think there's an Ubisoft thing coming up. I don't know if it's next week
or
the week
after.
It looks like the 10th,
Okay.
September 10th. Yeah.
And that Gods and Monsters game has been getting a lot of stuff where they change the name and seems like it's coming out this year, which has me intrigued. So we'll talk about that, maybe some other stuff. I think that's it. Do you guys have anything else you want to add?
No,
not really.
For all your porting needs, Equilibrium Splits on Twitter. Be sure to check it out. And just give a plug for Unity. Check out Unity if you're interested in game dev.
And if anyone from Unity is listening and wants to sponsor the pod, we're open for that.
Well, didn't Unity just do their IPO or something like that?
They announced it. They announced it. They haven't actually done it yet.
But it's like part of that documentation was that they're losing money every year. Did you see that?
Yeah, that's pretty typical for a company that's growing quickly. Maybe we should say that for the next show, because that is maybe an interesting topic for this show.
Forget Apple versus Epic. I want the Unity versus Epic war to start.
It's already begun, buddy. That's why Epic's no longer $1 million per platform.
Yeah, I guess that we are feeling the effects of that battle right now. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Sean's fucking snapping. Look at this guy.
Falling asleep.
I know. All this coder talk, so boring.
Let's talk some web dev, boys.
Go back to your web dev. Yeah.